After 5 days of running in Barcelona, Lewis Hamilton has finally given his verdict on Ferrari's SF-26. And that verdict? He's absolutely into it. The seven-time world champion has described the new 2026 spec Formula One cars as more enjoyable to drive than anything he's had in his hands for quite a while. That's big praise. But what really grabbed everyone's attention was how he talked about the way the car behaves. Hamilton said the SF-26 is oversteery, snappy, and sliding around. For some drivers, that would sound like a complaint. For Hamilton, though, that is exactly what he was hoping for. So let's start by looking at that comment in full. When he was asked about this new generation of cars, Hamilton said this era of cars is actually a bit more fun to drive. It's oversteery, snappy, and it moves around a lot, but it's also a bit easier to catch. Overall, he said he'd definitely call it more enjoyable. Those are not the words of a driver who's fighting the car or feeling lost. That's how a driver talks when he's really enjoying himself behind the wheel. But what does oversteery and snappy actually mean in simple language? Oversteer is when the rear of the car runs out of grip before the front. The back end starts to rotate, wants to swing around, and it feels like the car might spin. A snappy car is one where that loss of grip happens very suddenly, with little or no warning. On the face of it, that sounds scary and difficult to handle. But Hamilton added a crucial detail. This car is easier to catch. In other words, when the rear breaks loose, the driver has a bit more time to sense it, react, and correct the slide. That extra window lets you save it more often, and that's a huge change compared to the previous generation. The ground effect cars we had from 2022 to 2025 were insanely quick. But when they let go, they did it almost instantly and caught a lot of drivers out. There was barely any warning, barely any chance to respond. The rear would just snap away from you. Many drivers, Hamilton included, found that deeply frustrating. It made the cars feel less alive, less communicative, and less connected to what the driver was trying to do. The new 2026 rule set has flipped that feeling. These cars run with less downforce, which does mean less overall grip, but it also means their behavior is more progressive. They talk to the driver more. They give clearer signals as you get close to the limit. And when the car does slide, it tends to do so in a way the driver can manage, rather than in a sudden, brutal snap. This is what Hamilton is getting at when he says the cars are more fun. They reward touch, courage, and car control. They let the driver express themselves, more artist than passenger. Hamilton has also pointed out that the SF-26 is generating noticeably less downforce than its predecessors, which is exactly what you'd expect from the new rules that have simplified the floor and trimmed back the aero devices. Less downforce means you can't carry quite as much speed through the corners, but it also opens up more room for the driver to make a difference. In the last era, the cars were so quick and so glued to the track that the gaps between drivers were razor thin. Now, with the grip dialed back, there's more scope for real driving talent to shine through. And that environment plays straight into Hamilton's strengths. Barcelona also gave Hamilton an opportunity to sample the SF-26 in the rain. On Tuesday, when showers hit the circuit, most teams kept their cars in the garage. Hamilton went out, and he explained why. He said that last year, he arrived at the first race, and the Sunday of the Grand Prix itself was the first time he'd ever driven the Ferrari in wet conditions. And that made for a very tough race. So for him, getting that wet weather experience now and building that understanding was invaluable. That's the mindset of a driver who's thinking ahead, preparing for every scenario he might face. Another big positive has been reliability. Hamilton logged 85 laps on Thursday morning alone, which he described as amazing. Across the full 5 days of running, Ferrari racked up more than 440 laps in total, second only to Mercedes. For a completely new car with a brand new power unit architecture, That is seriously impressive. But not everyone in the paddock is completely relaxed about the Ferrari. Sky F1's Craig Slater reported that several people from rival teams had described the SF-26 as a handful. That suggests that while the car is quick, it might be quite sensitive to setup and not the easiest thing to drive consistently on the edge. Even so, Hamilton doesn't appear worried. On the final day, he set the fastest time of the entire test, a 1 minute 16.348, edging George Russell's Mercedes by a tenth of a second. If the Ferrari really is a handful, so far it looks like Hamilton knows exactly how to get on top of it. His working relationship with Charles Leclerc also seems to be starting in a healthy way. Hamilton explained that his first job is to listen as much as possible. At the end of each day, he and Leclerc come together and compare notes. What's good, what's bad, what each of them needs from the car. This is how a title-winning operation functions. Both drivers pushing one another, both feeding into the car's development. Hamilton also talked about the general atmosphere inside the team. He said he can feel a winning mentality in every single person at Ferrari, more strongly than ever before. That's a big statement. You can have the quickest machine on the grid, but if the people aren't motivated, aligned, and pulling in the same direction, you're not going to win. His comments suggest Ferrari is in a very good place mentally right now. The new power unit rules have also reshaped the challenge. The electrical component of the hybrid system has almost tripled in output, and drivers now have to think much more carefully about how they manage that energy over a lap. On top of that, the introduction of active aerodynamics, movable wings that adjust themselves at different points around the circuit, adds an extra layer of complexity. But Hamilton has already lived through 5 major regulation shifts in his career. He understands how to learn quickly, how to adapt his style, and how to home in on the new limit. Formula One has always been a dance between human and machine. In the last few years, the machinery has arguably taken over. The cars were so advanced, so dominated by aero and systems, that the driver's influence could feel almost secondary. The 2026 rules have nudged that balance back toward the driver. With less downforce, more movement, and greater emphasis on energy deployment, the person in the cockpit has to work harder. And that's exactly the kind of challenge Hamilton relishes. The comparison with Mercedes is important here as well. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli have both looked strong in the W7, and Mercedes completed more laps than any other team across the test. They appear confident and well prepared. But Hamilton knows that organization better than anyone. He spent more than a decade there and took 6 of his 7 world titles with them. He understands that to beat Mercedes, Ferrari will have to operate at an absolutely elite level in every area. Red Bull, as always, can't be ignored. Even though a crash cost them valuable running time, they still looked quick whenever the car was actually on track. The next big checkpoint is Bahrain, where 2 more days of testing await before the opening race of the season. The hotter conditions there will stress the cars and their cooling packages much more. Ferrari will be hoping that their creative engine concept and packaging give them a useful edge. In the end, Barcelona was just the opening chapter. But the early indicators for Hamilton and Ferrari are extremely encouraging. They appear to have a car that is fast, dependable, and genuinely satisfying to drive. They have a squad that looks united and driven. And they have a driver who is desperate to chase down an 8th world championship. The oversteery, snappy SF-26 might still be a bit wild, but in Lewis Hamilton's hands, it could just be a title-winning weapon. Hamilton has often spoken about his affection for previous eras of Formula One, times when the cars were raw, physical, and more of a handful. He said that some of his favorite races came in conditions where the car was right on a knife edge, where he had to dig deep and find something extra. Well, this new SF-26 seems to bring that sensation back. It's not a car that does everything for you. It's a car that demands total focus, total commitment, and every ounce of your ability. For a driver like Hamilton, that's exactly the environment that lets him perform at his absolute peak. So, what do you think? Is this the perfect car for Hamilton's style? And will it all pay off when the season starts? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.